Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about A Day Without a Mexican from 2004. And this is the winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this has been in the review vote for a long time. Long enough that I thought about just reviewing it just because I felt bad that it hadn't won, and I'd been saying it for so long. And I really didn't know much about it before it won. Like, I was sort of aware of it a little bit, but I didn't really research it because I wasn't making a video on it then. So I find the success of this film, because it did sort of do pretty well. It wasn't like a monster box office hit or anything like that, but it did actually do pretty well. And this was shot on video, like 2000s, early 2000s video. This came out in 2004. I kind of am fascinated a little bit by smaller films that are able to work and have a small following and are able to succeed within that kind of small, kind of niche in itself. A Day Without a Mexican definitely did that, and I think that's really cool because that doesn't really happen anymore, and even in 2004, it didn't happen very often. The whole idea of this film is basically that in California, one day, all the Mexicans disappear. And so California has to find a way to function without anyone from Mexico to, do labor or the workforce or anything like that. And so they can't basically function very well because they've basically lost a huge part of the population and a huge part of the population doing things that naturally they do not want to do. As well as they get into, having a large part of that culture Mexicans are, and having that completely gone shows you how underappreciated that group was. There was a film, and it's based on a book from the early 20s called The City Without Jews, about Austria and how they demanded that all Jews leave Austria and there be no Jewish influence, and how that culture was deprived of something because of that. And this is similar to that, although this is more magical and less like everybody's got to leave kind of thing. Which maybe that is maybe more realistic, because that always feels like that's something that America is doing. This film is good at doing certain things, but it's a little overdoes it a lot of the time. I do like that it kind of shows you how important I think various cultures are, especially Hispanic culture, and specifically Mexican culture, I should say, is important to America. And it is really important to America. It's a part of America we don't talk about a lot. We don't talk about how a large part of Texas and California and New Mexico, and I think it's Arizona, and probably other places, to be honest, were all part of Mexico originally, and we sort of took that from the Mexican people. And we should honestly talk about that more. We talk a lot about the Native Americans. I don't hear that brought up so much. Now, naturally, I've never been to California. I've never really been to many of those places that we took away from Mexico other than Texas, although I don't know if I've been to the part in Texas that we took. But anyway, that's not important. So this is more of a local film. It's obviously about California. It seems like it played more in California. It played in New York and various cities across America. And it played in Mexico, where it was a much bigger hit. Apparently #1 at the box office, or so Wikipedia tells me. I couldn't find out the number on the box, or maybe I misread it, I don't know. And it did do a lot better. It made about 4 million here, made about 5 million and change in Mexico, and a total of $10 million, which I think is pretty impressive for a film like this. But this is a film that is specifically about how important that culture is and how much we take that for granted. And I absolutely agree. I definitely agree. We take that for granted, and we don't talk about how we took that land, and we don't talk about how often I think people don't think about when they get to a certain place. They don't think about all the people who had to do the other tasks that they couldn't do or didn't do so that they would have the opportunity to do those things. And A Day Without a Mexican explores that, and that I really like. But the filmmaking, this is directed by a guy, Sergio Arreo, I think is how you say his name. He's an interesting guy, actually. He apparently has done a lot of different creative things. Sounds like a pretty cool artist. He was in a band in the early 80s, who I've never heard of, which I probably shouldn't pronounce, so I'm just going to have it down here about. And he made a documentary about that band. He's in a heavy metal band, or at least in 2005, called Los Heavy Mex, which that's a pretty cool name. And he sounds like a cool person. His former band, he made a documentary about them. That's the only other kind of filmmaking, or at least feature film making thing I could find from him. He sounds like an interesting person, but I don't know if as a director, he seems to be kind of playing with too many things. There's a lot of spinning plates in this movie, by far too many. And I kind of wish he maybe focused it a little bit and didn't go into kind of ridiculousness. Specifically, like, I think, you know, when all these Mexican people disappear, there's several, like, people who don't, and, you know, you find out, like, oh, well, they thought they were Mexican, but it turns out their father is someone else or something. And that happened, like once is enough, and you did it twice. It was like, all right, dude. I thought that was a bit much, and didn't have much to do with, like, politics or anything. Sometimes he'd have these, like, kind of writing go on the screen and be like, you know, you hear, like, this writing, and it would go, like, you know, the thing about the land belonging to Mexico, or like Guatemala and Honduras is not part of Mexico, and things of that nature. Some of that I found interesting, like the thing about land. I feel like more people should know that, so I'm sort of fine with that. But a lot of it, I was like, I kind of got the point you were making, and I didn't think that anyway. But maybe the point of this is for people who didn't know that. So I guess, but it did feel like a little over obvious. Like sometimes he would just overemphasize things to make sure you really got it. And I sort of think part of that, when an artist does something, you should think, one, like how they did it, how was that, but why they did it. And I think oftentimes with stuff like this, I think about, well, why he did it is probably because he felt like no one was listening, so he had to overemphasize it. I understand why he did that, but in another way, I don't, as a film viewer, I didn't really like that, to be honest. I thought that was kind of weak filmmaking, because it felt like he didn't have a ton of confidence in himself as a filmmaker. In some ways he did, because he had so many things going on. I think you'd have to have a bit of confidence to think all of this stuff could work, and all these talking heads, and like that you're going to get some of these things and take up all these characters, which, to be honest, they actually did. I was a little surprised by that, but I did find myself going like, yeah, I kind of, you know, I'm with you. And it felt a little obvious, you know, having people constantly eating Mexican food, people constantly, you know, eating burritos, but they're kind of like not understanding like how important that culture is to America. And I think it is incredibly important to American culture. And something that America should appreciate more is, like, we're supposed to be a giant melting pot, and oftentimes we underappreciate that by saying like, oh, well, you should be American. I'm like, well, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense, because to be American is to have a ton of different influences and different cultures who came here and formed this society. There, you know, the whole point of this society is a society of multiple different cultures and how we all influence each other. And if you're not able to recognize that, then you're probably not truly American. You're going for something else that is, you know, obviously not that. But a lot of people do believe that, and I think this film is trying to kind of counter that idea. I mean, I don't know if I would watch this film again. I know some people actually enjoy this film quite a lot, but I don't necessarily, but I appreciate what it was trying to do. I think it's cool that, like, I was watching film and paying attention to film in 2004. I do not remember anything about this movie. Like, I really had never heard of it before it entered the movie review vote. And then I looked on Box Office Mojo, and it got pretty close to the top 10 a bunch of times. And then, like, I think it opened in May 2004 and, like, had less theaters. Then in August had, like, kind of a comeback, which was right around the time for the election. I'm not sure, because it was released in Mexico, from what I'm to understand, around August of that year. So I think maybe they released it. I don't know if they're counting Mexican theaters, or they're counting like theaters close to the border, or they released it in other theaters because it was in Mexico and they thought that would feel. I don't really understand clearly the release strategy, but it seems interesting. Like, they really like got this film to work and make money. And, you know, 2000s video doesn't look great. And there's certain films, like another thing that won the movie review vote, Time Code. That was another one where I thought that one used video a lot better, and there's a reason it was shot like that. This just looked like it was a cheaper film, but it does try to tackle kind of a bigger issue. It doesn't explain, like, what really happened to them. It's sort of like The Snap or something. Like, they don't sort of explain it or anything like that. They're just kind of, like, gone and all that stuff, and it's like, all right, cool, whatever. But I think the point is to show you how important any race or culture that would disappear from America, you definitely feel it. But specifically in California, since so much of the workforce and the labor force and the economy is kind of basically rests on the shoulders of these people who will do all this work and do all these things, they should be more appreciated. So I 100% agree with a lot of the morals that this film is saying, but I don't necessarily think it's like a great political statement or anything like that. I think it's just like kind of pointing out something that honestly more people should know. So if anyone sees this film and they go like, oh, hey, you know what, I should have not underappreciated, you know, all my Mexican coworkers or all these people I employ, that I should appreciate them more and all the hard work that they do and how these businesses run with them. And there are people in this film who definitely appreciate those people. There are people who don't appreciate those people. So it does show either side of it, but I think this film is made more to show people, like, you should appreciate people who you basically consider invisible and appreciate all the hard work that they do. And I think, if anything, A Day Without a Mexican does that, at least shows you that, but it shows you over and over and over again, and then gets into some weird places where they're testing people's blood and they're trying to figure it's just like, maybe this movie was too long. Apparently it was a short in 1998 and then made into a feature later. I would say that it probably worked better as a short, although I couldn't find I didn't really search that well for this short. So I would say this film is good for changing maybe someone's mind, but if your mind's already changed, I think it's kind of just like reminding you of something that should have been obvious in the first place. And I think if you didn't know this before, there's probably something more wrong with you than anything. If the fact that A Day Without a Mexican sounds absolutely horrifying or shocking to you, I think maybe you should have woken up a long time ago and realized and appreciate how much that culture has done for America and probably California as well. So if you've seen A Day Without a Mexican and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Thank you very much for watching.